For years, the world has run on fossil fuels, with humankind using these ancient, non-renewable resources to power cars, airplanes, machinery, trains, home heating systems, and more. Meanwhile, scientists strive to create new alternative energy possibilities. Fossil fuels remain the most robust and effective means we have of powering vehicles and other machinery in reliable fashion. They give us the means to get around, keep our homes warm, to cook our meals, and more. Fossil fuels were formed from prehistoric plants and animals that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. When these ancient living things eventually died, they decomposed and became buried under layers and layers of mud, rock, and sand. Eventually, hundreds and sometimes thousands of feet of earth covered them. During the millions of years that passed, the dead plants and animals slowly decomposed into organic materials and formed fossil fuels. Different types of fossil fuels were formed depending on multiple factors. For example, oil and natural gas were created from organisms that lived in the water and were buried under ocean or river sediments. Long after the great prehistoric seas and rivers vanished, heat, pressure, and bacteria combined to compress and cook the organic material under layers of silt. In most areas, a thick liquid called oil formed first, but in deeper, hot regions underground, the cooking process continued until natural gas was formed. Over time, some of this oil and natural gas began working its way upward through the Earth's crust until they ran into rock formations called cap rocks that are dense enough to prevent them from seeping to the surface. It is from under these cap rocks that most oil and natural gas is produced today.
Global warming. Many of the environmental problems our country faces today result from our fossil fuel dependence. These impacts include global warming, air quality deterioration, oil spills, and acid rain. Among the gases emitted when fossil fuels are burned, one of the most significant is carbon dioxide, a gas that traps heat in the Earth's atmosphere. Over the last 150 years, burning fossil fuels has resulted in more than a 25% increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. If carbon dioxide levels continue to increase, then it will most likely result in a variety of impacts. In coastal areas, sea levels rise to the warming of the oceans, and the melting of the glaciers may lead to the inundance of wetlands, river deltas, and even populated areas. Altered weather patterns may result in more extreme weather events, and in inland agricultural zones could suffer an increase in the frequency of droughts.
Every week we're seeing new and undeniable climate events, evidence that accelerated climate change is here right now. Droughts are intensifying, our oceans are acidifying, with methane plumes rising up from the ocean floor. We are seeing extreme weather events and the West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets melting at unprecedented rates, decades ahead of scientific projections.
Air pollution. There are 7 important pollutants that are produced by fossil fuel: carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and hydrocarbons. Exposure to carbon monoxide can cause headaches and place additional stress on people with heart diseases. Cars and trucks are the primary source of carbon monoxide emissions. Nitrogen oxides appear as yellowish-brown clouds over many city skylines. They can irritate the lungs, cause bronchitis and pneumonia, and decrease resistance to respiratory infections.
There has been much discussion over the past 50 years about reducing the world's dependence on fossil fuels, primarily oil and gas. Lots of reasons have been advanced as to why this is desirable, ranging from US balance of payment problems to global warming. In spite of this, almost nothing has been done. Common sense would indicate that a serious effort to create new sources of energy would have worldwide positive effects. For example, the harnessing of hydrogen or helium fusion would provide limitless clean energy. So a large-scale research program would pay dividends many times over. The funding for this, however, remains at an insignificant level. Many of the oil-producing countries in the world have little less to offer. They are poor in other natural resources, and oil provides the only significant source of revenue. The obvious candidates are in the Middle East and Africa. However, even the U.S. government gets revenue from oil leases and fuel taxes. The oil service companies are based in the developed countries and provide support to the third world oil producers, thus creating a revenue stream for their parent countries. Cheap, clean energy would alter the balance. Third world countries having little to sell would become of little interest to the developed world, and being poor would provide little markets for our products and services. Just look at how much attention is paid to those poor areas now. So developed countries lose markets, and oil-producing countries lose revenue. Thus, they all have a vested interest in the status quo. The environment and the consumers of energy have no pressure groups, and thus don't influence policy. The U.S. dependence on fossil fuels is deranged, but there are several options we as people can make to move away from a harmful fossil fuel economy. One important step you can take to minimize airborne nutrient pollution is to conserve energy. You can do this by 1. Turning off lights, computers, televisions, video games, and other electrical equipment when you are not using them.
Bernie Sanders launched a new climate campaign on Wednesday, which is aimed at fighting global warming by banning new coal, oil, and gas mining on public land. The Keep It in the Ground Act, co-sponsored by the senator and Democratic presidential candidate, aims at plugging one of the big gaps in Barack Obama's climate change plan, which is his administration's continued sanction of fossil fuel extraction on the government's lands and waters. The bill would ban all new fossil fuel leases on federal government lands and waters. Existing leases would continue, but the bill aims to curb further leases in areas like the Powder River Basin coal fields, which are in vast areas of Wyoming and Montana.